What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. Now, as you could tell by the intro, we kind of rebranded a little bit. I know I had my old logo and everything changed. I've been working real hard on that. I decided to really change up a couple things just to reflect more how my channel appears. Obviously, everybody knows, I've talked about it to death at this point, but everybody knows how I started this channel and where I ended up, and I will never stop talking about mental health and how important it is, for everybody on this planet. It's a serious topic. It's a serious topic that a lot of people need help with, and I'm currently going through a lot myself, but, I lean on my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to help me out with that. It's always a good reminder when times are tough to turn towards, your Lord and Savior. So for me right now, that's what I'm doing. Obviously, I will never stop trying to help people go through, going through whatever it is they may be going through that's hindering them or causing them discomfort or a sense of hopelessness. I tell that to everybody, even though I'm not necessarily a mental health channel anymore. Every now and then I will dabble back into that, but as you all know, this is something I'm really passionate about when it comes to, sports talk, sports radio, sports media, all that stuff. That's something I really want to do in my life. And, no shame whatsoever to anybody that liked my mental health content whatsoever. I did too. It was a fun time doing that. But my whole thing is always that you never want to stay in the past too long. You got to look through the front windshield of life. And that's how I'm choosing to move forward. So obviously, and everybody's known this for a while, I'm just reiterating, especially since I changed my logo, my intro a little bit. But that's mainly, it's mainly just to reflect of what the channel is right now and where we're going. So I really appreciate you all still sticking with the channel. I really appreciate it, and I'm really grateful for all of you. I'm very blessed to be doing this. It's a fun time doing this. It's an escape from, the regular stresses of the world that is put on all of our shoulders, especially kids my age, 24, 25, 26, and even a little bit younger, 23, 22, 21, college kids age. The world throws us, a bunch, the world throws a lot at us, and it's just how we respond. So obviously, I used to do mental health on this channel, but now I'm more of a sports talk show. It was something I was kind of grooming for a long time. And, it's just something I'm very passionate about and something that I want to make a career one day. So I really appreciate you all still sticking with the channel. The love and support has been great. We are almost at 200 subscribers. So keep on liking, keep on subscribing. You're really helping out the channel. And once again, I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. So obviously, you all know I'm still a Bucked Up ambassador. So use promo code SHOW32. Get yourself 20% off any and all pre-workout orders at buckedup.com. So let's get started for today. We got a full slate for college football and NFL today. Last week, we discussed college football week 3. Obviously, we went over all those games. And the same thing for week 3 in the NFL. Yeah, week 2 in the NFL, my bad. So week 3 was this past week in the NFL, and we're going to be talking about that. And we're also going to be talking about college football week 4, a little bit of a recap, and I'm going to go into some details about quite a few games. So we're going to get it all started with the Friday night game, number 24 Illinois going on the road to number 22 Nebraska. Well, the Fighting Illini ended up winning 31-24 in overtime at Lincoln, Nebraska. So here's my whole thing with Nebraska. They have been notorious for choking for years on end. I can't even remember the last time they started the season 3-0. Obviously 3-1 now, but the strides that Nebraska has been making with Matt Rule at head coach, it's a good start. It's a good start, but they have to continue to do what they've been doing and lean on quarterback Dylan Raiola. He's a freshman. It's exactly what they needed. If we're being honest, the Nebraska Cornhuskers have not had a sense of a quarterback, and it seems like forever. The last one that's notable to me, at least, that I can recall is Taylor Martinez. And Martinez wasn't too bad. He was in the Big Ten championship with Nebraska. I believe they ended up losing to Wisconsin that year. I think it was 2014 or 2015. But regardless, Nebraska really hasn't had the guy at quarterback. And quarterback in college, it's starting to seem like the NFL. When you have a good quarterback, you're going to go places. You could think of all the programs in college football with great quarterbacks, at least the most highly ranked quarterbacks. They're all at the top of college football, except one who is claimed to be a superstar quarterback, and you all know who I'm talking about, Mr. Shedeur Sanders, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But again, the Fighting Illini, they fall. They beat Nebraska 31-24 in overtime. Dylan Raiola didn't have too bad of a game, 24-35, 297 and 3 touchdowns. It wasn't a bad game by the Cornhuskers whatsoever, but if you're at home, you got to win those kind of games. I personally thought Nebraska would be cruising to the game against Ohio State in a couple weeks undefeated. I guess not anymore. Obviously, I think the Big Ten is going to be a dogfight. It's literally Ohio State and then everybody else, in my opinion. Oregon hasn't looked sharp. USC lost this past weekend. We're going to talk about them in a little bit. But I honestly thought Nebraska was going to cruise to the Ohio State game undefeated. Wasn't meant to be. So the Fighting Illini get a road win, an important Big Ten win, 31-24 in overtime. Next game we're going to talk about, this is the Saturday slate game. Number 1 Texas against Louisiana Monroe. Now Texas won 51-3. That's no shock. But this goes to show that Texas truly is the number 1 team in the nation. For a long time, I told everybody I was bouncing between Georgia Bulldogs, Ohio State Buckeyes, and Texas Longhorns as to who's the true number 1 team in America. I feel like those 3 teams were interchangeable at least in the first 2 weeks of the season. After week 3, it was clear who was number 1, who's number 2, and who's number 3. I clearly think Texas is the best team in the country, and I don't necessarily think it's that close. Maybe compared to Georgia and Ohio State, it's a little bit closer, but compared to the rest of the country, it seems like Texas is really separating themselves right now, especially since you can lose your Heisman Trophy hopeful quarterback, Quinn Ewers. He can go down with an injury, and your offense doesn't skip a beat. You have easily the best backup in all of college football in Arch Manning, who has been showing out. Obviously, he started this past weekend because Quinn Ewers is still nurturing that injury. He went 15 of 29, 258 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Now, I get it. It's Louisiana Monroe. We get that. But how often do you see a team have probably the best backup in college football where your offense doesn't skip a beat? Arch Manning is going to be the best quarterback in college football for years to come after Quinn Ewers is gone. After Quinn Ewers makes it to the NFL next year, which he will be, I mean, he's more than likely going to be a top 10 draft pick. I don't care that he got injured. He's still a fantastic quarterback, and he's still in my Heisman rankings. I have him at 2 for the Heisman rankings just because he hasn't played the past 2 weeks. I have to drop him down a little bit. But I moved quite a few people around when it comes to my Heisman aspirations, at least my Heisman trophy watch list this early on in the season. When it comes to Texas, though, the simple fact that you can lose your starting quarterback and then your backup comes right in sometimes, in some sense, your offense looks a little bit better. You have the number 1 team in the nation. It's not arguable. Again, Arch Manning, it's not his time yet, but everybody knows what he can do now in that locker room. Texas is going to be fine. I think Texas is going to cruise their way to the SEC championship game. I think they're easily the best team in the SEC. Georgia, I'm not necessarily sold on them after that performance against Kentucky last week. 2 weeks ago, I wasn't a fan of that performance whatsoever. Ohio State has been showing out, but we'll talk about them in a few minutes. But right now, I think the clear-cut number 1 team in the nation, easily Texas, and rightfully so. They're ranked number 1, absolutely throttled Louisiana Monroe 51-3, like I said. But the whole story about this game and actually going forward for Texas, not only do they have a great offensive line, a great run game, great weapons at the receiver and tight end position, a stout defense, and a great defensive front, they have probably two of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Even though Arch Manning is a backup, he's already showing that he's better than a lot of the starters in college football. He easily could have went anywhere else and been a starter and probably have his team in a position to make the college football playoff. But he wants to carve his own path, and he's making his way at Texas. He's already putting on a show, and that's another blessing for Texas. They don't have to rush Quinn Ewers back. It's not like their offense is detrimental without him. That's why you can truly say Texas is the best team in the country. You can let Quinn Ewers heal as long as he needs, because Arch Manning, you literally have a stud in Arch Manning. He'll probably win the Heisman Trophy, give or take his junior or senior year in the coming years, but it's clear-cut that Texas is the number one team in the country. Necessarily, I don't think it's that close, but at the same time, other teams are going to be making their way up. And competition hasn't really been there yet, so we'll really see what Texas is made of. We'll really see what all these teams are made of that are in the top 10 as conference play starts up and, the season just wears on everybody. But right now, I think it's clear-cut that Texas is the number one team in the country, and that's that. Next game we're going to talk about, Ohio State, the third-ranked Buckeyes at home against Marshall. They won 49-14, despite Marshall putting up a good first-half fight. Ohio State seems to always do this crap. Ohio State always struggles. They're a slow-starting team, but that's nothing new with Ryan Day. Ryan Day is undefeated against the rest of the Big Ten, which is funny to me. I mean, I know Marshall isn't in the Big Ten, but I think that was an interesting stat line that he's 40-0 against the rest of the Big Ten except Michigan, which is funny to me. But that'll change this year. So a couple storylines in this game. Obviously, transfer Quinshon Judkins, 14 carries, 173 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jeremiah Smith, 3 receptions for 70 yards and another touchdown. And then Emeka Ibuka, 5 receptions, 117 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Will Howard, he was phenomenal the entire game, 16 of 20, 275 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ohio State still is up there in the top 3 of college football. I would put them at 2. I think out of all the teams that are in the top 10, they are easily the best team to go up against Texas, if we're being real. I don't think Georgia can handle Texas. I think Texas is going to whoop Georgia. I believe they play in a couple weeks. Either way, I think Ohio State, the way they're playing defense right now, I know it's inferior opponents. We all get that, but that's just the reality of college football at the start of the season. But sometimes you get those close games, USF and Alabama, for example. You get those games that, will scare you a little bit. But they right the ship. Same thing with Ohio State. They right the ship after a slow start against Marshall. Marshall, they gain their confidence. They go into that game thinking they're going to win, and they get an early lead. But, Ryan Day galvanizes the troops. They shape up, and they finally handle business. I think Jeremiah Smith is easily the best still. I've been preaching this to death for the past couple of weeks now, but Jeremiah Smith, I think, is the top receiver in college football. I know a lot of people would like to say Isaiah Bond from Texas. I don't think nobody comes close to the potential, at least, that Jeremiah Smith has. I think he's already better than Marvin Harrison, definitely better than Chris Olave or Michael Thomas, and he's definitely better than Emeka Ibuka on the team. Jeremiah Smith is a freak of nature, and he's a true freshman. Ohio State has got themselves... Ohio State, they just do offense so well. They do quarterback well, they do offense well. And I said for a long time that Ohio State has been spoiled with quarterback play. Well, they certainly are this year. I need to retract a little bit when it comes to my opinion on Will Howard. I thought he was just a more athletic version of Kyle McCord. No, he is absolutely way better than Kyle McCord. Throwing the football, running the football, his smarts at the line of scrimmage. Will Howard is definitely way better than Kyle McCord, and I got to give props to him. Even though Kyle McCord is playing okay at Syracuse, he's really showing out. Well, except this past week losing to Stanford of all teams. Except that stinker, Kyle McCord has actually been playing pretty well. But Ohio State 49, Marshall 14. Jeremiah Smith putting the entire country on notice. I don't think that's any shock. I mean, he was hyped up in training camp to be the next Marvin Harrison Jr. and possibly even better. I'm already seeing signs that he is way better than Marvin Harrison Jr., and Marvin Harrison is just now getting his footing in Arizona in the NFL. So tip of the cap to the Buckeyes and tip of the cap to Jeremiah Smith and Will Howard. Judkins had a hell of a game. Ibuka had a hell of a game. You know, Ohio State's really putting the country on notice, and I think they're going to be a formidable team in the Big Ten. I think it's Ohio State, everybody else in the Big Ten, like I mentioned earlier. So we're going to see as the season progresses how we're going to find out truthfully how good Ohio State is really in a couple weeks when they have to go to Penn State. If that's a whiteout game, if I'm a Buckeye fan, I'm a little bit nervous. Whiteout games at Penn State, not easy. All right, so let's continue to move on. The number 5 team in the nation, Ole Miss 52, Georgia Southern 13. Jackson Dart was phenomenal like usual. You know, no shock there. We also have the number 6 Tennessee Volunteers going on the road to the Oklahoma Sooners. And Tennessee won that game 25-15. Oklahoma, if they had any sense of offense, would have probably won this game. I never thought in a million years I'd be saying that Oklahoma has been carried by their defense. Now, Brett Venables coming over from Clemson, you know, I knew their defense, it took time, but their defense is actually really good. Again, you should expect that from Brett Venables coming from Clemson. That's the reason Clemson had so many dominant teams is because of their dominant defense when Brett was the defensive coordinator for Dabo Swinney in Clemson. Nico Iamaleava. Jeez, I can't say these quarterbacks' last name. Like DJ Ugalale. Oh man, I feel like an idiot butchering these names, but I'm just gonna call him Nico because I'm done trying to pronounce last names and butcher them because I feel bad because I'm a little bit of an idiot when it comes to that. But regardless, Tennessee goes on the road to Oklahoma, notoriously not an easy place to play whatsoever. So you have Nico going in. He wasn't terrible, 13 of 21, 194 yards and 1 touchdown. But I think the true story is that Oklahoma has no sense of offense whatsoever. They benched Jackson Arnold, their starting quarterback. I didn't necessarily think he was that great or that bad. But again, I guess you need a little juice when it comes to, you know, getting a spark for your offense. But that entire game, Tennessee controlled the line of scrimmage. Oklahoma's offensive line is absolutely atrocious. They have one of the best running backs in the country, and they cannot open up any lanes for him to run. And they can't even protect the quarterback. But again, Jackson Arnold needs to make better decisions. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been benched. So Oklahoma falls to 3-1. Tennessee's 4-0. We're going to really see what Tennessee is made out of going forward through the SEC. I think they're one of the best teams in the SEC. They definitely have a chance to, you know, make the SEC title game. I think the SEC is going to be a dogfight all the way to the end because there's a scenario with the next game we're going to talk about. Number 7 Missouri going to overtime with Vanderbilt. I've never seen Vanderbilt play so hard in their life. Vandy's 2-2 now. They should have beat Missouri. Missouri should easily have 2 losses right now. I think they're the weakest SEC team, but with their schedule, Missouri does not have that tough of a road to the SEC championship game. Now, the rest of Missouri's schedule goes like this. They're at Texas A&M next week, then at Massachusetts. That's a win. Texas A&M is probably a win too because I don't trust the Aggies. They barely beat Bowling Green, which go figure. Then they're home against Auburn, at Alabama, then Oklahoma, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and then finish off the season with Arkansas. there's real plausibility that it's entirely plausible that Missouri, of all teams in the SEC, can make their way to the SEC championship game because their toughest game on this schedule is going to be at Alabama. And Bama has not really shown the dominance that we're typically used to. I mean, I know, don't let the final score of the USF game fool you. South Florida had Alabama on the ropes up till 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then Alabama finally shaped up and handled business like they were supposed to that entire game. But Missouri has definitely a clear line to the SEC championship if they, stay true to themselves, don't turn the ball over, and get after the opposing team's quarterbacks. They have a road to the SEC championship game, and that'll throw the whole college football playoff for a little bit of a loop because who else is going to be representative in the SEC championship? Is it going to be Bama? Well, no, they wouldn't. Missouri would have the tiebreaker if they beat them. It wouldn't be Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is out. You got Texas, but you also have Georgia. I think the SEC is going to be a dogfight because Missouri, of all teams, has a chance. They have a chance to, go a full slate. Beating Alabama is a little bit of a tough ask for me, especially going to Tuscaloosa, but we'll see. We've seen crazier things happen, especially Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame. And this past weekend, BYU upset number 13 Kansas State, and it wasn't close whatsoever, 38-9. I have no idea what the hell got into BYU or what got into Kansas State, but that happened. College football, man. That's all I can say. So we talked about Missouri and Vanderbilt. 30-27 win for Missouri in overtime. Next game we're going to talk about, number 8 Miami going on the road to USF, the same USF team that took Bama to the brink up till 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Yeah, Miami didn't fall into that same pit, 50-15. They won. Cam Ward went 24-34, 404 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jordan Lyle, Miami's freshman running back. Now, obviously, it was one long run at the end of the game, but he had 6 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown. And then starting running back Damian Martinez finished the day with 3 rushing touchdowns on the ground. So when it comes to Miami, I knew that this would have been a tough game early on because this game had me worried as a Miami fan. This game really had me worried just because USF took Alabama to the brink. And I really wanted to know, okay, now you have a good sense, how does Miami stack up to the rest of the top 10? Direct comparison to Alabama, how was the first half? Well, in USF, Alabama, that game was 3-3 going into halftime. Miami, it was 22-15 going into halftime with the lead. And then Miami's defense shaped up. Having Jason Taylor as your defensive line coach, you're going to listen to that man. He's a Hall of Famer. I guarantee you that Mario Cristobal, the head coach, and defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, I guarantee you all those coaches were screaming their heads off in the locker room at Miami against South Florida this past weekend because there's no reason that this game should have been close that early. But Miami ended up beating themselves when it came to their penalties. It seems like every which way the direction they turned, it seems like they were committing penalties. But USF shared their fair share of penalties. But when it comes to Miami, obviously you give up 15 points in the first half. You're up by 7. You go into the break. Now, Miami teams of old would have found ways to keep these teams in the game. They would have found ways to literally let USF stay in this game. But it didn't happen this time. And I think that's because of Cam Ward himself. Obviously, the coaches matter. But when you have a leader at quarterback that can do it all, you change the entire complexion of your college football program. That's why I think Cam Ward is the best college football quarterback right now and my number 1 in the Heisman race right now. You see the way he's performing week in and week out. Miami is putting the country on notice still. I know everybody's going to consider it's USF. Well, this is the same USF team that took number 4 Alabama to the brink with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. It took till 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter for Alabama to shape up against USF whereas Miami made those adjustments at halftime and then proceeded to not allow a single point the rest of the game from the Bulls. So Miami handles business 50-15, and I think they're top 5 in the country. I really do. I'm not even trying to be biased. If you look at the way other teams are performing right now, I think Miami, you can consider them a top 4, maybe top 5 team right now. USC ended up going back to their old tackling ways against the Michigan Wolverines. They lost 27-24. I was betting on USC to win this game. We're going to see, we were going to see another top team going up against Michigan, see how they stacked up with the rest of the country, which is another reason why I think Texas is the number 1 team in the country. They walked into Michigan and beat the brakes off of the Wolverines, whereas USC, they reverted back to their old tackling ways. Kyle Mullings for Michigan had 159 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Miller Moss still played okay, 283 yards and 3 touchdowns. But Lincoln Riley's team, I still think they're good. I still think they're fine. I don't necessarily know if they'll make the college football playoff, but they'll still be a good team, going forward. Florida State finally gets their first win, beating Cal and an ACC opponent. So, it's about time. And the same thing with the Florida Gators. They ended up beating Mississippi State. So the 2 Florida teams finally got back on track, it seems like. But obviously, Cal is not necessarily the toughest opponent Florida State's going to play. Obviously, they play Miami. I think they still play Virginia Tech, Louisville, Clemson. There's still tougher roads ahead for Florida State. But they finally got on the board. Coach Mike Norvell doesn't deserve to be fired. It's time to hold the players accountable. That's been my mantra for the past 2 weeks, because I think it's unjust that, so many people are throwing shade at him just because Florida State's team decides to not show up whatsoever. It's not Mike Norvell's fault. Partially is because he's the head coach, obviously, but when it comes to Mike Norvell, I think he's a good coach. He rebuilt Florida State once. He'll do it again with the right players. I just think they whiffed on the quarterback in the transfer portal. There's a reason Damian Martinez from Miami played with DJ Uiagalelei at Oregon State. I think there's a reason Martinez didn't follow him to Florida State. I think that's self-explanatory. All right, two more college football games we're going to get to real quick. James Madison, the Dukes, put up 70 points at North Carolina. James Madison won 70-50 against North Carolina. That is the most points UNC has ever, I think they have ever given up at home. And they don't let the final, that's a 20-point game. That easily was a 35 to 40-point game at one point. Tip of the cap to the Dukes. They really handled business. Clemson won 59-35 over NC State. No surprise there. NC State is one of the most overrated teams right now in the ACC and probably the country. Obviously, you can even say they had no business being ranked right now. Grayson McCall was better when he was at Coastal Carolina. He really can't compete at this level. Obviously, it's different going from Coastal Carolina and who you're playing in the Sun Belt to NC State. You're playing teams like Clemson, like Tennessee. You're playing the big dogs, and Grayson McCall has shown that he just can't do it. And then Colorado ends up going 3-1 after a Hail Mary against Baylor to send the game to overtime. And Colorado ended up winning in overtime. I still think Shedeur Sanders is the most overrated quarterback in college football. I really still don't get the hype around him because Colorado's schedule going forward. Okay, they're 3-1. Their lone loss at Nebraska. Okay, that's fair. You got to go to USF, then UCF, then the Knights. Then you got Kansas State. They're still good. Then you got to go on the road to Arizona, home against Cincinnati, at Texas Tech, home against Utah, at Kansas, home against Oklahoma State to finish the year. I can realistically only see you guys winning 2 games, and that be Cincinnati and Texas Tech. The rest of those teams, I can easily say they might beat the brakes off you guys. So you would end up going 5-7. So that's one more game than last year, so we'll see. But I really seriously still don't get the hype around Shedeur Sanders. He has Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn at wide receiver. You know, any quarterback in the nation would kill for those two to be on their team. I think Travis Hunter's still one of the best players in college football, and it would not shock me if Travis Hunter would be the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. He's a phenomenal wide receiver. He's a phenomenal DB. He might be a better DB than he is wide receiver. Who knows? He might even play both ways in the NFL. Very unprecedented. It really hasn't happened ever, but it's a possibility. So Colorado, they're 3-1 right now, but I can easily see them going 5-7, maybe even 4-8 again with the remaining stretch of their schedule they got. But we'll see. You know, they ended up beating Baylor. I'll give props to them. They played well and took a Hail Mary to beat them and the end of regulation to send it to overtime. Bunch of BS there. But as far as that's our that's our week 4 recap for college football. My Heisman watch, I updated this. So number 1, again, Cam Ward. I think he's the best quarterback in college football right now, especially the way he's playing. I don't think many people are going to argue with that. Everybody's going to call me a Miami homer for that, which, yeah, I am a Miami homer, but name one other quarterback that's playing better than Cam Ward is. Name one quarterback that is more valuable to their team than Cam Ward has been to Miami. I could show you the history of Buckeye quarterbacks compared to Miami quarterbacks and who's more valuable to their team. There's a reason Ohio State was competing for national championships year in and year out, or at least in the national championship mix. Because they had guys like that, and Miami didn't have much at quarterback. Now they do. So number 1, Cam Ward. Number 2, I'm going to put Quinn Ewers. I still think he's in the Heisman conversation. He's just, they're taking it slow with him. They're going to rehab him because Arch Manning has it from here. He's fine. Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. He's phenomenal. I'm going to put him at 3. Ashton Genty, still in my top 5. Running back for Boise State. And then 5, I'm going Jeremiah Smith. I'm dipping out on Travis Hunter just for the moment, just because it seems like he's putting up more notice when it comes to his DB position, at least compared to wide receiver. I don't know. He's just not making as many waves as I figured he would right now. I just think more of the talk is going on Jeremiah Smith, but I think Jeremiah Smith is better than Travis Hunter at the wide receiver position. Overall player, Travis Hunter's the best player in college football. No doubt about that. So a couple week 5 games to look forward to this upcoming weekend. Friday night, we have Virginia Tech going to Miami. We'll see on that game. I don't make picks when it comes to my team. I just don't do it out of habit. Number 8, Oregon on the road to UCLA. Oregon's going to beat the brakes off of UCLA. Number 3, Ohio State going on the road to Michigan State. I think Michigan State will play them tough in the first half, but Ohio State will pull away. I can see that game being like a 56-14 sort of game, like Ohio State usually does to Michigan State. Louisville going on the road to number 16 Notre Dame. Number 15 Louisville versus number 16 Notre Dame. I'll take Notre Dame. Number 20 Oklahoma State at number 23 Kansas State. I'm going to take the Cowboys to win this game. And then the big game of the week, number 2 Georgia at number 4 Alabama, where President Donald Trump will be. He's going to be in attendance at the game. How about that? But the way Georgia has looked, I don't know. I'm going to take Alabama. I know Georgia struggled with Kentucky. Alabama struggled with USF. Both seem to be fine now. I think I'll give them a pass on, the small skids they had. But I'm going to take the Crimson Tide to beat Georgia. Yeah. I'm going to take Jalen Milroe over Carson Beck, Kalen DeBoer over Kirby Smart. I think Bama wins a shootout. Not necessarily a shootout, but I think they win a close game. I'll say 27-24 Alabama. All right, let's move on to the NFL. So, a lot of crap is going on in the NFL right now. I'm going to go briefly over the games, some of them, not all of them, but some of the games that happened this past weekend. So, obviously, the Jets 24, Patriots 3. We got the Giants 21, the Browns 15. Colts won 21-16 over the Bears. The Vikings stomped the Texans 34-7. The Steelers beat the Chargers 20-10. The Panthers, of all teams, beat the Raiders 36-22. The Seahawks beat the Dolphins 24-3. The Ravens beat the Cowboys 28-25. And then the Chiefs beat the Falcons 22-17. So a couple things we're going to talk about when it comes to NFL as a whole right now. Obviously, I just went over the games and the schedules and some of the final scores from this past weekend in the NFL. But I'm going to let my man Colin Coward from the Herd talk about the reality of the Patriots.
But when New England beat Cincinnati, I'm sitting there thinking, hey, and New England's got a bite. They're terrible. Bill Belichick left Gerard Mayo a mess. New England is talentless on offense.
Which is true. If you're New England, you went from week 1, you beat the Bengals, you're riding high, you're doing fine. Yeah, you got the brakes beat off of you by the 20th ranked offense in the NFL. I seriously do think the Patriots are trash. I may have been fooled early on since they beat the Bengals, but I have to remember the Bengals are notorious for starting slow in September. It doesn't surprise me at all that the Patriots were able to beat the Bengals in week 1, but I guess I fell into that trap of saying, oh, New England might have some bite, which they did until now. They're terrible. They really are. Bill Belichick, as Colin Coward said on the Herd last week, Bill Belichick did leave Gerard Mayo a mess. They have nobody notable on offense. They have no sense of wide receiving core, running back room, offensive line, or quarterback. I said earlier, Joe Milton, Jacoby Brissett, Drake May, do any of them really have a chance to succeed in New England because of the lack of weapons, the lack of skill position players? I don't know if they can succeed there, but I can see New England still competing for the number 1 overall pick later this year. I mean, you're getting routed by the Jets, and the Jets honestly aren't even really that good. There's an issue. Next story in the NFL we're going to talk about. The Browns are going to continue to be the Browns. Week in and week out, the Browns always manage to surprise me. They're the only team that makes Daniel Jones look like prime Peyton Manning. Like, Daniel Jones had himself a day. And if we're being realistic, Daniel Jones is going to be out of a job. He went 24-34 for 236 and 2 touchdowns. Devin Singletary ran for 65 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper at least showed up for Cleveland, and he showed up for my fantasy team, so I appreciate that, Amari Cooper. But when you look at the Browns, they're going to continue to be this way. That contract for Deshaun Watson is looking worse and worse by the week. Let alone, never mind him being an inconsistent quarterback. He's not even a good quarterback anymore. And he's on the hook for $250 million guaranteed. I honestly do not understand, still to this day, why you go for this guy who, one, didn't take a snap for over a year after leaving Houston, is a creep. I still don't like him as a human. But when you look at this, brick by brick, this is one of probably the worst contract in NFL history. It might be up there. I might say Dak Prescott's contract might be worse eventually down the line for the money that Dallas is paying Dak Prescott. But when you look brick by brick at this contract from the Browns, the Deshaun Watson issue is, this is probably the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place with him. You can't move him because you're just going to be paying him for no reason to not be. You're going to be paying him not to play football if you cut him. Then you move to Jameis Winston. I think that's a better option at this point. I don't know why Cleveland refuses to make that move. I would have moved on to Jameis Winston a week ago because one way or another, it's a bad situation all the way around for Cleveland. Either one, you're paying Watson to play and he's just not delivering, or two, he's sitting the bench and you're still paying him a lot. So you might as well, if he's not improving your team, what good is he anyway? You are going to be paying him either way. This team is too talented to not at least compete for the AFC North and compete for a playoff spot this year. I've been the biggest Cleveland hater my entire life because I'm a Steeler fan. But even I can acknowledge the fact that you guys have so much talent on the team. You guys have so much talent that is going to waste. And I think Kevin Stefanski is one of the best head coaches in the league. You know, this crap with Watson, it's gotten worse. He's gotten way worse. He's not gotten better. You're either paying him to play, which his play is not good, or you're paying him to sit. And at that point, he's not going to be detrimental to your offense. Either way, you're paying him. You might as well just bench him and give Jameis Winston the keys to the offense. Couple more stories we're going to. Obviously, Bryce Young got benched for Andy Dalton, and apparently it was the right decision because Andy Dalton threw 3 touchdown passes in the first half against the Raiders. Now, I know it's the Raiders, but the Panthers ended up winning 36-22. I feel for Bryce Young, but there's plenty of other teams that need a quarterback right now that probably would be willing to trade for Bryce Young. I don't think Bryce Young is done yet. I compare it to the Baker Mayfield situation from Cleveland years ago. He just needs the right fit. The Panthers have nothing. Andy Dalton is he's a vet. He's a decent quarterback. Andy Dalton has been for the majority of his NFL career. He's been a serviceable quarterback. But I think about the Miami Dolphins, where Skylar Thompson goes down and Tim Boyle was in at quarterback. Yeah, none of those guys can even come close to what Tua can do for that offense. So you might as well, depending on what the situation's going to be with Tua, if I'm the Dolphins, give up a defensive piece and give up some draft capital to the Panthers. Go get Bryce Young or go get Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson is showing out for Pittsburgh. He actually had his best passing game as a Steeler. He's 3-0 with the black and gold, with the black and yellow. He's 3-0 with them. Say what you want about Pittsburgh. That defense is immaculate. The fact that Herbig came in for Highsmith and had 2 sacks by himself, that just shows the Pittsburgh Steelers' depth on defense right now. Pittsburgh is looking dangerous in the AFC North. Maybe they're pretenders, maybe. But Justin Fields is looking really good. I don't think you can bench him. I know some people in Steeler Nation want to see Russell Wilson, mainly Stephen A. Smith on ESPN First Take. He really wants to see Russell Wilson, but at the same time, I don't think you can take the ball out of Justin's hands. One, you might shoot his confidence in the foot, but now I just think this is his team. Justin Fields is the future of Pittsburgh, and going forward, it's his team. So, cap off, tip of the cap to Justin Fields, having one of his best passing days as a Steeler so far. Actually scored more than 2 touchdowns. How about that? And Pittsburgh actually scored 20 points in a game. How about that? So 2 more things we're going to talk about real quick. 3. 1, Mahomes is not Mahomes anymore, it seems like. Mahomes is struggling mightily. Despite being 3-0, Patrick Mahomes is being carried by his defense, especially against the game in Atlanta yesterday. They leaned heavily on their defense to, get out of there with a win. Let's see. The Dallas Cowboys, they can't stop a nosebleed on defense. Micah Parsons and that entire Cowboys defense, they talk a lot of smack when it comes to their defense. They talk a lot of talk. Well, it seems like they can never back it up on the defensive side of the football. You can run all over them. The Ravens had over 200 rushing yards. Derrick Henry over 150 rushing yards. That's just the reality of them. I don't understand. You talk all this smack. If you're Dallas fans, you should be worried right now because your team sucks. Your team is awful. That Dak contract is horrible. That entire offense looks inept right now. Yeah, you fought back in the game and came back. Well, your defense is trash and can't stop a nosebleed right now. Anybody who can run the ball has a legitimate chance to blow the Cowboys out. And then final NFL story we're going to talk about. I feel bad for Caleb Williams. I really do. I still believe that he's the most talented quarterback that the Bears have had ever. And that includes Justin Fields. But this is what Chicago does. They ruin their quarterbacks. That offensive line is a bunch of pylons. That offensive line is a turnstile. They cannot protect Caleb Williams whatsoever. Through 3 games, Caleb Williams has had 3 NFL starts. He has been sacked 13 times. What the hell is going on? Chicago, get your act together. This is your franchise. This is your future. I think the Bears are going to ruin this, man, like they ruined Justin Fields. When you're getting hit all the time, they take a toll. Ben Roethlisberger early on in his career was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL, but that was because he kept running around a lot and trying to extend plays. But you also look at guys like David Carr, when the Texans were first introduced. I think through the first 3 years of his career, he got sacked more than any quarterback in NFL history, like 75 times or something like that. Yeah, Caleb Williams is well on his way to that. I feel so bad for Caleb Williams because he has so much talent. He has so much potential. He really does. He's a good quarterback. Is his accuracy spotty? Yes. The Bears have weapons. Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. They have a defense. Their defense is good, but that's no shock because that's the Bears. The Bears always have a good defense. Like Pittsburgh, they can't ever get the offensive line right. But it seems like Pittsburgh is actually making strides to be better, considering they're undefeated right now. The Bears, they're going to get Caleb Williams killed on that field. Caleb Williams is constantly running for his life. And you can't be successful in the NFL when you're getting sacked 13 times in the first 3 weeks of the season. I really feel bad for Bears fans that just want to be in a good conversation to possibly make the playoffs and a good position to be competitive in the NFL, but their offensive line is a bunch of pylons. It's a turnstile. 13 sacks speaks for itself. It's actually tragic of what's happening in Chicago right now because the Bears are so inept. They have their most talented quarterback in history that's even more talented than Jim McMahon, who won the Super Bowl for them back in '85. The Bears are going to get Caleb Williams hurt real soon. 13 sacks through his first 3 NFL career starts. And that's going to wrap it up this week on The Lake Show, everyone. I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. I'm very blessed to have you all join me today. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. Again, God bless, as always.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want, and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's